If you want to go beyond the rink and into the dressing room, there's only one place to be. With a hockey reporter who was once mistaken as an NHLer by Jeff Finger, and a diehard Maple Leafs fan who has not one, but 2 Ken Baumgartner jerseys. This is the HockeyVerse with Michael Trakos and Johnny Legend. Tighten your chin strap. This could get ugly.
All right. Oh boy, where do we start? Kyle Dubas is gone. Jason Spezza, gone. Sheldon Keefe is almost certainly gone. And there are no guarantees that Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner, or William Nylander will be back. I didn't see this coming, folks. I don't think anyone did, including the Leafs. These are uncertain and, quite frankly, unfathomable times for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Someone screwed something up big time. And depending on what happens this summer, it could set the franchise back years or even decades. Now, for a team that finally made progress and won a round, it's embarrassing and frustrating and, frankly, inexcusable. But it's not surprising. 1 step forward, 2 steps back. That's the motto, isn't it? Well, it should be. The Leafs just completed their best season in almost 2 decades, and as a result, they parted ways with their GM, then lost Spezza, who was thought of as the GM in waiting, and are surely going to be without their head coach. Worse, there's now talk that Matthews may or may not re-sign, and maybe that Marner or Nylander will be traded. It all depends on who Brendan Shanahan, who somehow managed to keep his job amidst this succession-like power struggle, hires to run the team. Will it be St. Louis's Doug Armstrong, or Carolina's Eric Tulsky, or Brad Treliving, or Ray Shero? I don't know. One of those guys. And who's going to be the coach? Well, whoever it is will take over a team that is very much at a crossroads. To say that this is an important summer for the Leafs is an understatement. What happens next could define whether this team builds on what they accomplished this year or reverts back to that Burke and Nonis era of disappointment. With that and much, much more on today's episode of the HockeyVerse.
You just found the world's latest and greatest hockey, sports, and entertainment podcast. This is the HockeyVerse. On today's post-mortem episode, we discuss why Kyle Dubas is no longer the GM and look ahead to what is a monumental summer for the Leafs. We're also joined by longtime Canadian press reporter Greg Strong, who explains why this is a difficult time to be a Toronto sports fan. By the way, check out our show notes for timestamps if you want to fast forward to your favorite part. Also, if you want to be on a future episode just like this one, email your questions to heyhockeyverse@gmail.com. Oh boy, it is going to get messy.
Yeah, I didn't see this one coming, Johnny, as I said. I don't know if you saw it coming. I know you were talking about you thought Dubas was going to be fired, even though I was saying I couldn't imagine a scenario. You actually were thinking this was going to...
Well, I think
is this coming according to plan for you?
Well, I can't remember what episode it was, but I said I think he's already fired. Remember?
yeah. Maybe episode 1. Yeah. You've never been a fan, have you?
Well, you know what? Here's the thing. I wasn't. And then when I saw him getting all excited and arguing with fans and throwing water balls, I'm like, maybe that's the guy.
Yeah. I don't want to say I've never been a fan, but I became a fan after the trade deadline this year. And, I thought he was in a difficult spot. He didn't give up a whole lot. And I thought he, gave this team every shot it deserved by getting Ryan O'Reilly, Luke Shen, Noel Acciari. Really, the list goes on and on and on. And I thought the goaltending moves he made in the summer actually were decent moves. So, yeah, to think that this team's going to go forward without Kyle Dubas, I'm not so much concerned over, the genius is no longer going to be running things. I'm just kind of concerned as to, is Kyle Dubas getting blamed for the fact that Austin Matthews couldn't score in the second round?
I don't think he is, because if you listen to Brendan Shanahan, he flat out, it was a press conference. You never see, the press conference is usually a bunch of just bull crap. And then you got to find out through rumors and stuff what actually went on. When Brendan Shanahan just went up and spilled the beans, he said everything that went on. Nobody had to do any research.
Yeah, well, I did some research, and from my research, Brendan Shanahan said what he said because he was completely caught off guard by what Kyle Dubas said, and Kyle Dubas saying that he doesn't know if he has the stomach for this, if his family has the stomach for it, very much changed how the Leafs went forward.
Yeah, that was the nail in his coffin.
Yeah, and I don't know what he was trying to accomplish, but the end result is the Leafs didn't feel like they could trust him going forward. And when Dubas tried to, revert back on what he said and tried to come to some sort of agreement where both sides would be happy, the damage was done. And unfortunately, this is going to trickle down into everything that happens this summer.
Yep.
So
and who's going to do it?
And that's the thing. If there was a guy out there like a Kyle Dubas where you're going, oh, this guy's even better than the guy they had, then you're saying, okay, well, I don't care that Dubas is not going to be at the helm anymore. So like when the Leafs went from Fletcher to Brian Burke, there was a feeling like, okay, Brian Burke is exactly what the Leafs need right now. Or when the Leafs went from I think it was Dave Nonis to Lou Lamoriello again, it was okay. Lou Lamoriello is he's going to bring in a different culture, but right now you're going Brad Treliving, Doug Armstrong.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of Lou Lamoriello, I saw a thing. He traded when he was with the Leafs. He traded Verhaeghe.
He traded Verhaeghe. Yeah, Verhaeghe was nothing though at the time.
No, he's not. But look now, just like I said before the playoffs started, I thought Freddie was the guy. I always thought Freddie was the guy.
Yeah, it's difficult though. Like you look at like Zach Hyman. Well, why did Florida trade him? Right? They traded him for nothing to the Leafs. Like a lot of guys need that change of scenery. And I could tell you, I covered Carter Verhaeghe from the time he was drafted to when he was a Marley to every kind of prospect camp. No one saw this coming. Not the Leafs, not anyone. Sometimes a switch is flipped. But I don't know. That's an argument, though. I read a story this week about should the Leafs have hung on to Lou Lamoriello over Kyle Dubas, and what does that alternate universe look like? And the one thing that was brought up is that Lamoriello wouldn't have been taken to the cleaners by all these guys in their contracts.
No, definitely not.
Like the holdout by Nylander, I think Lamoriello would have just sent him to Robidas Island.
Yeah.
And then also, the one mistake that Dubas probably did make, and I hate calling it a mistake because I like the guy, is signing John Tavares. And it was a deal at the time where I think everyone praised it, but looking back now, it probably sunk the Leafs.
Yeah, you're looking back now, but the thought process in the deal is let's get Tavares now, win the cup in 2 years.
Win multiple cups.
Yeah. In 2-3 years, and then he can kind of fade off into the sunset as a 2-time Stanley Cup champion on the wing.
It was like when they signed David Clarkson, and Dave Nonis famously said, we're not worried about year 7. We're worried about year 1.
Year 1 was terrible.
Year 1 was terrible.
Didn't he get suspended like in preseason for half the season?
Yeah, it was John
John
Scott was getting in a fight with Phil Kessel, and Kessel was whacking him with the stick, and then Clarkson jumped off, and ever since then, it wasn't just a different thing. But it's funny, though. Like a lot of the comparisons between the Leafs are always the Capitals and how long it took Washington to win. And I was looking at this, and because Kyle Dubas has already met with Sidney Crosby, so it's almost like jumping from one scenario where you've got some star talent and a star core to another. But you look at it, like George McPhee was the guy that drafted Alex Ovechkin, and he went to a Stanley Cup final. It was a team that was always good in the regular season, but then he leaves, and the Capitals get Brian McClellan as their GM. Again, how many people know that Brian McClellan is the GM of the Washington Capitals? His first move is bringing in Barry Trotz. 3 years later, they win a Stanley Cup.
So maybe history is going to repeat itself in Toronto, but
yeah, maybe it's going to be a guy like Brian McClellan who no one really knows that much about, doesn't think that highly of, but he brings in a Joel Quenneville. And I think that might be the bigger move, is forget about who the GM is. Who's going to be coaching this team?
Well, Joel Quenneville's got to get permission to come back into the NHL.
I think he'll
after
get it.
all that. I know he's working on it. But I mentioned Joel Quenneville before the playoffs started, just when we were talking about who would replace Kyle Dubas. I think we had an episode.
Or Sheldon Keefe.
No, Quenneville. You think Quenneville for the GM?
No, you
Or
said
the coach?
You said Dubas. I'm saying he'd replace.
Oh, did I say?
Sheldon
Yeah,
Keefe.
Keefe. Yeah,
yeah.
That Dubas on the brain.
Yeah. I like Quenneville as a guy that could, help this team get over the hump. Like he's won multiple cups with Chicago.
What about Quenneville?
I know the stain is hurting him because of the Kyle Beach stuff, but
What about Quenneville and Stan Bowman together as a package deal?
I don't think the league's going to go for that.
They won't let them hang out. They won't let them hang out again.
I don't think so. Yeah, that's an interesting one because Stan, again, if you're looking just at results, fine. But now we're in
Optics.
We're in a
You're
climate.
optics,
We're in a climate now where you bring in both guys, and it's like, ooh.
Well, I'll put it this
They
way:
both willingly turned a blind eye to stuff that was going on.
the people that were protesting aren't really Leaf fans anyway.
What do you mean?
Like the people that would be protesting if they hired both of those guys, they wouldn't be Leaf fans anyway.
You don't think so?
No, they're.
Oh, it's a different climate. You've got to be cognizant of that. And it's not even Leaf fans that you probably push away. It's the sponsors. And yeah, I can't see that happening. Quenneville, on the other hand, I think you can get away with a Joel Quenneville. And I don't know who's going to be running things, but honestly, I like Ray Shero as the option. The guy, I talked to Ray about taking over in Pittsburgh, and he said, it's an honor having Sidney Crosby and a Evgeny Malkin and a Chris Letang as your roster, but it's also a huge responsibility. He goes, you're not just trying to win a cup for yourself. Because you're trying to make sure that these guys' legacies are cemented.
Yeah, you don't want them to fade out. And
yeah, so he took it as a
place.
huge responsibility. Like, hey, I've got to get these guys, make sure they've got the Hall of Fame resumes, that they're on the Mount Rushmore of hockey. And I think that's the mentality they have to take with this, is like, you've already wasted a lot of time in Matthews' career and Marner's career, where you're going, okay, one playoff round win, as good as these guys are and as great of a team this was, it's unacceptable.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, and the scary thing is they had him. He was coming back. Dubas was their first choice.
Yeah.
Until he shot himself in the foot.
Now, I know you don't think that the GM thing matters, but already there's talk that, with Dubas gone and a lot of uncertainty, that, Matthews went from about ready to sign a contract and a long-term extension to now, being really iffy. And
now they got to sell him on it again. So it opens up. He can sign after the first, but when is that window closed? Can they?
It doesn't close until his contract's up.
Okay.
Yeah, but here's the thing. A lot of players do this. You can sign me up until training camp.
Till the season starts, yeah.
And then after
that's what I mean by the window. So they got that much time to sell him.
Theoretically. And Johnny Gaudreau did that. He said, hey, once the season starts, we're not talking contracts. You guys had your chance. Now all the leverage is in my hands. And what did Johnny do? He left where they could have had
destroyed the Calgary Flames.
And then he leaves, and then Tkachuk leaves. So, that's the thing. Matthews leaving might be the first domino to fall, where you're going, okay, now Marner is just not sure if he wants to hang around by himself and take all the pressure.
Okay, let's play this game. Matthews isn't going to resign. What do you do?
You trade him. You trade him now.
4.
Well,
because everybody knows that you got to do it
on Twitter,
right? So you're not getting that Austin Matthews, Braden Shen.
You would trade him for Braden Shen.
No, and somebody else.
What are you talking about? No, you did not just say that. Braden Shen?
No, I'm joking.
He's old now.
I know.
Why would you trade him for Braden Shen?
I wouldn't. I'm joking.
Okay. God. How about, Matthews for Chicago's number 1 overall pick?
Well, that's a no-brainer.
But would Chicago do it? If you're Chicago, would you rather have the guy that's a guarantee sure thing and doesn't need a year to step in? It can already just come in and score 60 goals? Or are you going to go with Connor Bedard?
But you always want that guy.
Which guy?
The guy who you don't have to worry about. Like, Matthews is going to do it.
Yeah, but he also cost you 11 or probably $13 million by next year. Versus
the Leafs are going to have to pay some of that money. No matter who they trade it.
But you can't, though, because you can't take on a contract that hasn't taken effect, right?
Well, this 12, I mean, you're going to have to trade him before the season. So you're going to have to take on a
But
piece
Chicago
of this.
doesn't care about the money. Like they're not even close to the salary cap, the top of the cap.
Because you'll have the no trade kicks in, right?
Who's no trade clause?
Doesn't his no trade kick in on the first? I think they both have. Marner and Matthews both have a no trade.
Yeah, but okay. Yeah, Matthews is going to be up in a year, though. Like, we're talking, it doesn't matter. Don't worry about the no trade. The thing is, would you take, if you're Chicago, you're taking a guy who's got salary and is a ready-made star, and Toronto's taking a guy in Bedard, who'd be the number one pick, who's on an entry-level contract. So it makes sense. Now, the only question is, Toronto probably has to offer something more to sweeten the pot.
Oh, 100%. That's what I was thinking, salary. But
Yeah, well, probably another player or probably another
who?
pick. Maybe they have to give up another first-round pick even to make that one.
does Chicago need a goalie? Matthews and Murray?
Trust me. If you're trading Matt,
I don't know if that's sweetening the pot, though.
No, then you have to give up another pick to make them take that. But I don't know, like the fact that we're talking about Matthews possibly being traded, what a freaking disaster.
Well, you have to look at it realistically. If he's not going to sign here, you got to get something for him.
Exactly. Imagine
Right?
you can't lose him for nothing.
So we're not talking like we want to trade him to get rid of him. We're talking in the event that he doesn't want to play here, you got to get something.
I think you have to know by the end of the summer if Matthews is re-signing or not, and if he's not re-signing, you have to pull the trigger before it gets to the point where you just lose him for nothing.
If he doesn't re-sign on the first opportunity after the first, I don't think he will.
Yeah, and that's why it's paramount. Like we're at the end of May here. The Leafs have a draft to figure out, and they've got Matthews to figure out, and oh yeah, they've also got like 12 to 13 guys who are coming up on UFA status this summer. So they almost have to fill out half their roster. It's going to be a busy year for whoever's taking over this job.
Yeah.
It's like hit the ground running.
Yeah, but then you got to look at it the other way. You might get a better GM because they're like, hey man, build your team.
And that is the sweet thing that you can kind of offer. This isn't when the Edmonton Oilers were looking for a GM. That was one of the main complaints. Is like, yeah, okay, you got McDavid, you got Draisaitl. You're also handcuffed by a salary cap where you can't really add anything. Toronto's still in a position where they're going to be up against the cap before they sign anyone else, but at least you're starting with young guys who are under contract, and you still have that option of you can trade a Nylander or you could trade a Marner. You could pull some sort of move. I'm just kind of curious, like, are you done with this core? Like, have you seen enough, or can you nibble on the outside? I know I asked the same question to Dave Alter, and he was like, no. Someone from the core has to answer for this. It can't just be, replacing the David Camps and the Alex Kerfoots and guys of that ilk.
And maybe it was Dubas that answered for it.
So that's enough, eh?
Maybe.
Well, no, but how about you? Like, what do you think?
I mean, it's hard. You're going to trade a good player for an equally as good player. Why not just keep them together?
Well, it's a different flavor of a player. Like, we're not saying that these guys aren't good players. It's just the fit might be wrong. And instead of having, 3 or 4 superstars, if you include Tavares there, all skilled guys, all pretty much play similar games when you're talking about none of them bring any grit to the table or physicality. Maybe you swap one out for a Zach Hyman type. Maybe you swap one out for a defenseman that can take some of the pressure off of a Morgan Riley. Maybe you go out and you get that goalie that's been there. The only thing is I just don't see any options like readily available. And who knows? Maybe there's a trade to be made. Like, we didn't see the Matthew Tkachuk for Jonathan Huberdeau trade. No one was predicting that.
No.
Huberdeau wasn't on the market, and yet that trade happened. So it's going to take some creativity. And I know you're getting a guy from St. Louis, and you're mentioning Braden Shen. Fine. I'm not going to let you live this one down. The guy's 31 years old, man. That's old now. But he's a St. Louis guy. Maybe you grab a guy from St. Louis. Maybe you trade a Marner for a Robert Thomas. Maybe that's just a different look.
You think that's enough?
Or maybe you get a Colton Parayko. Like, maybe not for those guys, and Marner specifically, but maybe that's the kind of guys you start targeting. Some guys with a little bit more sandpaper. I know Parayko was on the Leafs' radar a long time ago. I like him as a defenseman, but that's the thing now. It's like, and I think that was the one of the points that Brendan Shanahan was making is that, it's not that Kyle Dubas did a bad job or we don't like the teams that he was putting. It was just like,
It didn't
we
work.
need something different. Yeah, it didn't work. And even by adding the Ryan O'Reillys and guys of that nature, whatever the reason was, the fit wasn't there. So maybe, like what you keep talking about, maybe you got to get a Connor Hellebuck.
Or, what about, Connor Hellebuck? Or even, what about adding two simple pieces that you wouldn't think of, like Corey Perry and Tom Wilson somehow? That would, if they were on this team in the playoffs, that's different. Totally different.
And maybe it's even addition by subtraction. Maybe you say, you know what, we got rid of Nylander. We're not going to get a Nylander quality player, but we're going to remove that $7 million off the cap, and we're going to get 3 players who all bring different elements who add up to $7 million.
Yeah. Or who all bring the exact same element as each other.
Yeah, and they're not Nylander. They're not going to replace his offense, but that's not what we're trying to do here.
No.
So,
no, they got lots of offense. They need room.
There's going to be some out-of-the-box thinking, but it's just, I didn't think we were going to be in this situation. When the Leafs beat the Tampa Bay Lightning, I thought everyone's job was safe. You could even see it in the handshake line. Sheldon Keefe looked like a lot of pressure was off him. We saw Kyle Dubas yelling with Tampa fans. That was obviously taking a lot of the strain. I thought a lot of that was just gone now, and they're like, okay, the Leafs can play. Dubas can just go back to doing what he was going to do this summer. Sheldon Keefe can just continue to grow. Instead, we're at a point where it feels like, back in the early 2000s when the Leafs were just jumping from like Dave Nonis to then Uncle Cliffy came back and was running the team, and they got like Peter Horachek was behind the bench, and you had like Randy Carlyle, and it was just everything was in flux. It never looked like a team that had its crap together. So it's a weird time to be a Leaf fan. It's a weird time to be covering this team because, like I said, it doesn't seem like a team that just had its best season in 20 years.
Well, one thing we can't do is predict anything that's going to happen, apparently.
No.
Well, how about this? Remember that question that I asked you, before the second round, and we took a lot of crap for? Who would you rather build a team around, Austin Matthews or Tkachuk?
Yeah.
And we took a lot of crap because we both said Tkachuk. Well, how does that look now?
Well, it's looking pretty good. So Vegas versus Florida, possibly in the Stanley Cup final. What's your excitement level for this series?
Well, I have to watch it because we need to talk about it.
But aside from that,
I don't care.
yeah, Vegas.
Actually, you know what?
I think it's gonna be a good series.
I don't know who I want to win, though. I guess.
I don't care who wins. I just want to see a good series. If it goes 7 games, and part of me is like, I'd like Sergei Bobrovsky to keep.
Yeah,
rolling.
I wouldn't mind to see them win for Bobrovsky, especially after the year he had, or the couple years he had.
And then the same thing with Matthew Tkachuk. Everyone was like panning that trade, and I'd like him to get his due. At the same time, Vegas, man, what a franchise! How lucky would you have to be?
Everybody's cast-offs and lucky, and they're in Vegas, right? Where luck matters.
Imagine being a Vegas Golden Knights fan from the start, and this is like your life. First year, you go to the Stanley Cup final, and then what is this, the 4th year in the conference final out of 6 years, and you're going to a second Stanley Cup final. You've got star players coming left and right. One leaves, another one comes in.
Hey, I know another team that kind of happened to, and then they didn't win anything for 56 years and counting.
Who?
Leafs.
Oh, you mean at the beginning? Well, that was a 6-team league, man. 6 teams.
So?
What do you mean so?
So there's 30, and they've only been in the league 6 years. They've already been there twice.
What Toronto did in their first little while versus what Vegas has done in a 32-team league?
I'm saying, to quote Mike Babcock, there's going to be pain.
For who?
Vegas at some point. They're not going to win every year.
But like they don't win every year, but they're final, then conference final, then conference final.
Yeah,
then
and when
final.
when they lose, you got the they're still new in the league.
Yeah, but man, like we're talking right now, like they're a really good team, and they've always been a really good team.
Yeah, they're not always going to be a good team though. Come on, you got to.
What are you arguing here?
You got to throw some. I'm just trying.
You're saying they're
to
gonna get a 56 years drought
At
where they
some
don't
point.
even get past the first round, basically.
I was trying to. That was me crapping on the Leafs.
And your only reason for believing this is because Toronto sucks.
Because Toronto sucks. Yeah.
Okay, that's your argument.
Yeah. Remember,
because
I'm the
because
Leaf.
other markets don't do this. You know that, right?
I
Like-
know that.
Like the Boston market, they
No.
have successful teams. Chicago, successful teams.
I'm gonna guarantee.
Tampa, Florida, even now, Carolina.
I'm gonna guarantee you there's 26 or 27 teams that don't even know who their GM is. Never mind care that he got fired.
Yeah. Yeah, probably. Although I don't know, like I know who the GM of the Leafs are and the Jays. I don't know who the GM of the Argos is. And I think that's the
I don't even know if they have a GM.
I guess it depends on how much you care about the sport. And that's the funny thing. Like we talked about George Richards about this is it's the worst time for the Florida Panthers to make it to the final is the same year that the Miami Heat are going to go to the final.
Yeah, basketball trumps all down there.
Yeah, and I think they're up 3-1 on the Celtics. Probably going to close things out. And yeah, imagine if they went both. Wow, what a year for them.
Here's something to look up. When was the last time that the Stanley Cup final of two teams that both got there for a sweep?
Yeah, it's been just an awful conference final. Like between Florida, Carolina, and Vegas and Dallas. Like it's just been like, ugh. The conference final always kind of sucks. It's brutal.
2-1 and 5 overtime.
That's what I said, man. First round, make it a best of 7. Second round, best of 5. Then a best of 3. And then just winner takes all. It's summertime
cool.
now, man. I don't care,
That'd
but
be cool.
so. All right, we're gonna bring on Greg Strong. He's arriving to the studio shortly, and
First in studio.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. He's got his pulse on not just the Leafs but all Toronto sports, and he can kind of tell us about if you're a Toronto sports fan, should you jump ship and become a Jays fan, or maybe it's time to go Argos and go that way. So let's go right down to our live guest. All right, we've got a guest for today's episode.
In-studio guest.
Pleased to announce our first in-studio guest, Gregory Strong from the Canadian Press, longtime sports reporter. How you doing there, Greg?
Good, Mike. How are you, bud? Pleasure to be on.
Yeah, well, I wish we could be talking about better times for Toronto sports fans right now, but as we were, you wrote an interesting article here, quoted myself in it, just about the tumultuous. Did I say that right? Tumultuous?
Tumultuous.
Tumultuous.
You're the writer.
That's
I guess you can write it, but reading it's a different thing.
Well, uncertain times. How about that? Uncertain times for not only Leaf fans, but Raptor fans and Jays fans. I thought we were going to be possibly celebrating 2 championships this year with the Leafs and the Jays. Turns out we're talking about blowing things up for the Toronto Maple Leafs, and the Jays, last time I checked, were dead last in the standings, and the Raptors looking for a head coach, don't know what direction they're going in. What do you make of this, Greg?
Well, Toronto is a unique sports market for sure. When you look at all the Canadian centers, and expectations are always sky high. Yes, I mean the Maple Leafs, for the Leaf Nation, a crushing second round exit, and now big questions, existential, you could argue, with regards to the core 4 and the front office drama. It's off the charts. In general, the other Canadian or the other Toronto sports teams, kind of mediocre, but certainly not getting it done. The Raptors, mediocre season. The Blue Jays, yes, they're in last place. It's early, of course, of the Major League Baseball campaign. And of course, after I write that article, they go out and beat Tampa Bay 20-1. But, they could still certainly turn it around and get into the playoff mix. And of course, the Toronto Argonauts. That's kind of the hook of the story. There's the one bright light in this market is the CFL team, the reigning Grey Cup champions. Toronto FC really struggling. The Toronto Arrows really struggling. But this is a hockey town at the end of the day, more than any other sport. And big questions being raised, Mike, as we witnessed firsthand not too long ago.
Yeah, I don't know where they're going to go. Do you have any idea, Johnny?
The Leafs, you mean?
The Leafs. Like let's focus on the one that really kind of pushes the needle.
The one that's been making it. You know what's funny? After that 4 overtime game, I said, you know what? The Leafs are going to do something dumb today just to overshadow the fact that game almost went 5 overtimes, and that's exactly what they did.
What was the dumb part in your mind?
Well, all the GM crap.
Right? What does that mean now? What's the GM crap?
Well, first of all, Dubas kind of shot himself in the foot, didn't he?
I don't know. What are you talking about?
You didn't watch any of it?
No, but what do you mean he shot himself in the foot? Like,
well,
do you
he
think
kind of had it locked up,
he
and
exited himself. Like, do you?
I think he exited himself. So Brendan Shanahan said, he said, you might want to do something else. You might not want to do this. You might want to spend time with your family. You're not all in. You're gone.
Yeah, it was like watching. You guys watch Succession? I don't know if you watched that TV show.
I watched a little bit of it.
It's just like power struggle, politicking behind the scenes. Everyone stabbing each other in the back, and I talked to a number of people after Dubas's press conference where you're saying he shot himself in the foot, and that caught everyone off guard. Like there was a script that everyone was following that day, and Dubas went completely off script. And I don't know if he did it on a whim or if there was some sort of strategy behind it. But where we stand right now is a team that everyone was kind of saying, okay, this is the year they're going to win a Stanley Cup, and hey, let's celebrate the fact that they finally slayed a dragon. Now they're talking about who's going to run things. Are they going to trade Austin Matthews or re-sign him? Are they going to trade Mitch Marner or William Nylander? Who's going to be coaching the team? These are questions that we shouldn't be asking after the year they had.
The ebbs and flows, Mike, of this team are incredible. I mean, think back to that first round where they finally got like the overtime win they were craving. They were taking control of a series where they were being outplayed. They were getting big goals and big victories in games they had no business winning.
Yeah.
This is a new Maple Leafs. Like, what's happening? This is not what Toronto fans are used to. And I remember before round 2, before game 1, they had a practice on the off day. And I remember Kyle Dubas, Brendan Shanahan, Jason Spezza, just leaning over the railing, enjoying a cup of coffee. I'm like, these are new times here with the Maple Leaf. Happy family. Leaf Nation is strong. They've got the 8th seed Florida Panthers rolling in. This appears to be a winnable series. The Leafs were favored by many odds makers to actually win the Stanley Cup at that time with the 8 teams that were remaining. And boy, I mean, the valley that the Leaf fans are now in, it's really something. And it's just a fresh wrinkle in a sports team that continues to deliver the content.
Is that the new level for a good season now? At least we were favored at 1 point to win the Stanley Cup.
Well, they won a round, Johnny. Like, yeah. I know the bar is low, but at least they did something that hasn't been done since 2004. And Greg, like, how long have you been covering not just the Leafs, but Toronto sports? How far do you go back?
Yeah, about JFJ 20 years. I mean, I'm not. We have our main hockey guy, Joshua Clipperton, who handles the Maple Leafs. I go in a pinch hit scenario from time to time, and then certainly help him out at times for big games. But yeah, 20 years in sports.
So you were there for JFJ,
yeah.
John Ferguson Jr. You were there for Brian Burke, Dave Nonis, Uncle Cliffy, Cliff Fletcher 2.0.
Yeah.
Am I forgetting a guy? Like it's been a terrible run these past 20 years up until the point where they got Brendan Shanahan, who goes out and gets Lou Lamoriello, who then passes the baton over to Kyle Dubas. It was finally looking like, hey, Toronto is now attracting star players, star talent. You had Mike Babcock coaching. You had Jason Spezza, like you said, up in the press box now, running things on a front office end. You had a succession plan. And now it's like, are they going to go back to the whole, like, what Peter Horachek coaching this team, grasping for straws era? Like, there's some dark days in the past that, I don't know if a Toronto sports fan knows what could happen in these next couple years now.
I think it's certainly an unsettling time for Leafs fans, just because there are so many unanswered questions right now. Who's going to be the new GM? Is Sheldon Keefe going to remain as head coach, and what's going to happen with these pending roster decisions? That being said, I do think once there is a GM or an interim GM in place, and I imagine that will probably happen sooner rather than later, then I think you can kind of take a deep breath and fans can kind of look at the next month and say, okay, we're going to be all set for the draft. We're going to be set for the July 1st decisions. Let's not forget there's a great core in place with this team. Mm-hmm. This is a team that's had a ton of regular season success and appears to be, primed for success in the next few years, given its current roster situation. So I don't think it's as, I don't think, fans need to be as nervous as they might be. It's just, whenever there's a big change, like a GM on the way out and a new one coming in, can be a little unsettling.
How many other hockey markets really even know who their GM is?
I was just going to ask you, Johnny.
Right?
I was going to say, do you care who's running the team, or does that not even factor into you?
Toronto's like the only city that cares who their GM is. It was the same thing with the Blue Jays when Alex Anthopoulos was here. He was the only GM in baseball that anybody even knew.
So there's an example, though. Well, Alex Anthopoulos again. I'm having trouble with these names, but he's doing great since leaving Toronto. Yeah. And now you're looking at Kyle Dubas. He's already met with Sidney Crosby. Reports that he was already in Pittsburgh meeting with Crosby. Is this going to be one of those ones where, like Alex Anthopoulos, you're kind of going, geez, what did the Leafs, bid farewell to?
Well, here's the thing. Was he fired, or was he just Dubas, or was it just announced he wasn't going to have his contract renewed? Is he even allowed to go?
He had to get permission, and he was granted permission because his contract runs out at the end of June.
Yeah.
Just like a player, like July 1 would be his free agency, basically. So he wasn't fired. It was just, we're not going to renew your contract. And that's the thing. All the reports, was it money? Was it autonomy? Was it family?
Well, I heard
he was trying to get Brandon Shanahan's job?
Yeah, I heard that when the agent came in on the Thursday, he wanted more money than they had agreed on originally.
I heard that he was given an option where it was going to be a few $1 million less, but he was going to get access to Tannenbaum's private jet for whenever he wanted to go on a little mission, watch a team here and there. That's a nice perk. It's better than flying first class.
I mean, who knows what's really going on with these things, right? I mean, you hear what you hear at the news conferences, at the availabilities, but who really knows for sure? It's not like they're taking an hour's worth of questions here. They're often, making their statement, taking a few questions and moving on. The other thing too is when you do have that GM title, I mean, who's actually making the calls? And this isn't just a Leafs thing or a Blue Jays thing. It's just a pro sports things. Mm-hmm. There's so many front office guys in the mix, men and women who are making decisions on these things, whether you're the team president, the GM, the president of hockey ops, the director of player personnel, whatever it is, everyone's got a say. And, the GM title, I'm not sure it has the jam that it once did.
He's just the guy that puts his name on the paper.
It's like the assistant to the GM.
So when is Brendan Shanahan going to make himself GM?
Well, that's the thing. The Shanahan plan has been going on for 9 years now. And
a 5-year plan?
Yeah, and that's the thing. When I heard this argument from a lot of fans is give me a core that includes Matthews, Nylander, Marner, and Morgan Riley, which is what Dubas was gifted, and ask me how many rounds I'm going to win in the playoffs. And if it's 1, I'm going to quit. I'm not going to ask you to fire me. And that's the thing. What was the bar set at where you'd be as a Leaf fan happy, where you're saying, okay, Dubas did a good job? What did he actually accomplish? He signed John Tavares, and he made the playoffs, which they were making the playoffs, and they won a round.
Well, by definition, and you can look in the dictionary, a Leaf fan is never going to be happy.
Well, until you win a Stanley Cup.
And then what?
Yeah.
I thought the big thing with the Leafs is that, there's all this talk with the core 4 and Morgan Riley and all this stuff and what's going to happen. To me, the bigger question is the goaltending. And they really seem to roll the dice on Murray, Samsonov, and Wall at the end there. They didn't go out and really address what was their need. I mean, they needed a number 1 goaltender, and you can argue whether Murray or Samsonov could be that guy. But to me, this is not like Curtis Joseph of yesteryear or Ed Belfour.
No.
Where you've got, we've got a number 1, we've invested, here we go. To me, it was more, you bring these guys in and hope it works out. And given their injury situation, didn't really work out. But, to me, that was kind of a glaring issue that perhaps has not had the same juice as the core four in their future.
Yeah, I think he was hoping to outscore the goalie problem.
Well, let's go around here. What do you think the biggest need now is in the summer? Like, this team is probably going to be without a head coach, is without a general manager, and has some decisions to be made over Matthews, whether to trade one of the core four. How would you rank them there, Greg?
I think they're in a great position, but yeah, some big decisions to make for sure. Once you get that core four situation settled, then I think you'll have some clarity. But you're right. I mean, you need the GM, and then if you do bring in a new GM, are they going to want to bring in their own coach? That doesn't always happen. Where, sometimes, kind of gives that buffer where you've got the old coach and then you can always gas them the next season and bring in your own guy. So it'll be interesting to see, to me, it's all about the GM, interim GM, and then you can let the dominoes roll.
Yeah, I had Sheldon Keefe fired after game 2 in the first round.
Yeah. Well, he got out-coached. And he won the series despite being coached. But how about you? Like, what do you think? Do you think the GM is most important right now with the Matthews contract looming, or?
Well, I think the GM thing's easy to fix if Shanahan just makes himself the GM.
He's not going to do that.
I know he's not, but that's the easiest way. He knows the team. He knows the players.
It's not even an option, apparently.
Really?
Yeah. The options are right now is to try to poach Doug Armstrong from St. Louis, or poach Eric Tulsky from Carolina, who's basically looked at as a Kyle Dubas light.
What about Treliving?
He's an option, and Ray Shero should be an option. I don't know how close of an option he is. Like, Ray Shero, remember, is the guy that won a cup with Sid Crosby and those guys, and went to New Jersey, drafted Jack Hughes, and then a lot of that team, a lot of the success is because of what Ray Shero did. Honestly, if I'm going to rank him right now, I think the Matthews thing is the most important. Whether it's one of those names I just mentioned running the ship, or if it is Shanahan, or if it's like Shanahan's younger brother or whatever, number one right now, you've got to get Matthews on board. Because if he leaves, it's just going to be a trickle-down effect. I think it's going to be very similar to what we saw in Calgary. And can you imagine this team without Austin Matthews? It'll be a laughingstock if the Leafs manage to blow that. Thoughts, Greg?
Austin's obviously a huge piece, and I think they, will do whatever it takes to get him signed. He's obviously, his resume speaks for itself as far as individual accomplishments. Hasn't had the playoff success, obviously. But yeah, you've got to get that done. But I think first up, obviously, you got to get the GM done. And are we sure that Brendan Shanahan is not really kind of the GM?
Yeah, maybe that's what Johnny was kind of alluding to. Yeah. Is like his hands are on the steering wheel.
He's just got to call himself the GM and get the deals done.
I don't know what deals he blocked of Kyle Dubas, because apparently that was a report, is that Dubas wanted to do some things and he had to pass it by Shanahan, who had to go to the board and get that passed over. But I don't know. It's a similar situation as like a lot of teams now, where the president is now the GM, like what you were saying before. Yeah. All right, last thing before we let you go, and again, thanks for coming on, Greg. Who wins a championship first, Jays, Raptors, or Leafs?
Oh, the Toronto Blue Jays, I think. Yeah. I mean, I'm. That's my usual beat, and I really like the pieces, the core that they have in place. And I mean, of course, there's talk. I mean, we're talking about Austin Matthews here. What's going to happen with Vladdy Guerrero and Bo Bichette? They've got, they could be extended, and that could happen, anytime in the next few months or next season. Certainly going to be a talking point as we move forward. But I mean, great core. They're big spenders. They've got, great vibe down at the park. I don't know if you've been down. They've got all the renos down. Already, yeah, 41,000 now. It's like a little more. It's just a good vibe. The team, not doing as well as they would have liked in the early going here, the first quarter of the season. That being said, there's still 4 or 5 games over 500, and they're in a powerhouse division. So I think the last place thing is a bit of a unique one, just given the strength of the AL East. So to answer your question, Mike, I'm going Toronto Blue Jays well ahead of the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Yeah, I got Jays too.
You got Jays too. Yeah, no way Raptors win, and who cares about the Argos?
The Raptors are a little bit of a mess right now too.
All right. Well, thanks again. This is Greg Strong. You can find his work in the Canadian Press. And again, when you write for the Canadian Press, your work's everywhere. So easy guy to find for the HockeyVerse. That was Johnny Legend. I'm Michael Trikos, and we'll see you next time at the rink.
Thank you for listening to the HockeyVerse. If you enjoyed this show, please share the love by subscribing, leaving us a 5-star rating and review wherever you listen, and by introducing the HockeyVerse to your friends and family. Also, be sure to check out thehockeyverse.com. While you're there, sign up for our newsletter. It's specifically written for you, the diehard fan. From insider news to opinion and analysis, our NHL-focused newsletter will entertain and equip you for the conversations of the day. We thank you for your support, and until next time, this is the HockeyVerse.